Hey everyone!
Hey guys, welcome back to Austin. I literally said I was going to do it this week.
I cannot believe that we're doing this again, Mary Jen.
I told you I was going to do it.
Oh my gosh.
Psych! Today's podcast is on conflict resolution. Whoa.
And that was just a little example of potential conflict. But like Mary Jen said, today we are talking about conflict resolution. And we are going to be talking about how conflict has the potential to ruin your ministry. But first, this is YWAM Kansas City Podcast. I'm Austin Heil. This is
Mary Jen.
And this is
Desi.
Welcome back. We're so excited to be with you guys for another week. We're pumped about this topic. We're more pumped. I said it last week, but this week it's even better weather out. I think I'm just going to give you an update every single week.
Yeah.
But it's like 70 degrees, I think, close to, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Close. 68 maybe.
Yeah. Very nice. I'm feeling great. Wasn't so much this morning, but feeling great now. And let's just hop right into it. So today we're going to be talking about conflict and how it has the potential to ruin our ministry. What does conflict look like in ministry? Does anyone have any examples or any definitions that they want to share?
I think with most anything, conflict often starts as like some sort of miscommunication.
Yeah.
Whether it's a miscommunication of an expectation that you've placed on someone else, or maybe it's miscommunication of like their role, what they're supposed to be doing, or it's a miscommunication where someone took something the wrong way and took offense at it.
Yeah. That's really good.
That's a good definition. Else to add? No, I think miscommunication is definitely like the number one thing to conflict, and I think even like people can take a lot of things like personally sometimes, and like it's kind of like their inward thing that comes out as conflict and just
No, that's really good. It does really have the potential to ruin so much stuff in ministry because you want to be focusing on the people that you're going there to reach. And this is in ministry and missions, but there's also just in life. We have things that we want to be doing, but whenever you have an argument with someone else, it kind of can really bring tension. And just even bring it back to a video we did, I think 2 to 3 weeks ago, whenever we talked about partnership and how important partnership is. We were talking about partnership in terms of a lot of times different denominations, different churches, different ministries. But this time we're going to be mainly talking about even partnership within your own team. Because if you have conflict within your own team, it can really, really mess up what you're trying there to do. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to start with just a quick example.
Please do.
Go for it.
It's kind of this idea that like, I love Jesus, but I can't stand Christians. That is a very bold topic, but this is what I mean, is that whenever you're in missions, especially whenever you're overseas or on the mission field, there's a honeymoon phase where everything is perfect. And I think we all experience that all the time with these different things that we're going through. There's this honeymoon phase that we have. But then over time, you kind of realize like, this person isn't doing their dishes. This person isn't cleaning up. This person's always late. This person always interrupts me. I don't feel like I'm really connected with this person at all, and I have to be with them in the same base overseas for years. Like, how the heck are we going to do this? And that can really deter from what we're called to be doing on the mission field. And there's this place of having to humble yourself and realize, and this is going to be the first value that we're going to talk about, is that the problem probably starts with you. And this idea that you might even have a Jesus issue, not just an issue with the other person. You might have an issue that maybe you and the Lord are disconnected, and that's why this other person is so blatant in your face. At least it seems like to you, because they might have no idea that they're doing something wrong. But it's this idea that the issue really does start with ourselves, and that if we can humble ourselves and realize I need to go to the Lord before I talk to this person, I feel like that's a good basis to the start of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And also like keeping in mind that even if you are like in a position of like leadership or something like that, ultimately you can only work on yourself. You can only work between like you and the Lord. You can't say if someone isn't like doing their job or something like that, you can't force them to. That's like versus like maybe you have to evaluate your own motivations. Like, why are you so upset about them not doing their job? Is it like do you have control issues or things like that? Like really evaluating your own motivations or like are so important before like just going into a conversation with someone and be like, you did this wrong and this and this and this. But like like you said, taking it to the Lord first.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, that's so good. I think I'm also going to make kind of a bold statement. I think conflict is actually healthy if you approach it in the right way, right? Because conflict, like we said, a lot of the times is things that we have our own issues with, or things that we need to like go through with the Lord, and conflict can bring that up, which is good, and obviously it should be held in like the right way and dealt with in the right way. But I think it's actually normal to have conflict, and it's something that everyone goes through, whether they're in the mission field or the working place, in the in the spheres.
Which that's interesting, because it seems like even though it's healthy, I would completely agree. I think we all would. But most people tend to try to avoid it. Most people, like, as soon as it gets a little bit tense, they try to run away or not even talk about it. But that's just going to create bigger conflict later. And I think that's kind of like the point. I think there's this point whenever you run away from tension or run away from conflict, that it's like you have the option, there's conflict here, you have the option to either go the healthy route or the unhealthy route. And if you avoid the conflict, you are immediately entering in to the unhealthy part of conflict rather than entering into the healthy part. And
I think a lot of the times when you don't deal with that conflict, and especially for me in my life, I found that it can be bottled up into like these emotions and feelings that one day just like kind of like burst out. But it needs to be dealt with in the right way, and it needs to be talked about with the people you're having a hard time with, or firstly going to the Lord and asking him like what is in your own heart that like you're struggling with, and what is it that you need to actually work on.
We had a class this week about conflict resolution, and our teacher Leanne was telling us that she, in preparation for the class, looked up, like, just Googled Bible verses on conflict or whatever, and it was like the first thing she found was like just 13 pages, not even of the verses, just like references, just pages and pages of like what the Bible says about conflict. And I think the reason there's so many, and like after looking at some of those earlier this week, it's not just about resolving conflict. It's not just like, okay, this came up, we need to get it dealt with so we can move on, but it's also about like preventing it, like taking those measures before, where it's like looking at your own heart. Like, you won't have conflict in the first place if you have wrong motivations in your heart.
No, that's really true.
That's so good.
I think even going back, like I said, to our conversation previous about partnership, and this verse in John 17 that says that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. And so there's this idea that we're supposed to be one with each other just as much as Christ is with the Father. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever really thought about how much Christ and the Father are one, but they're one. And as in, it's kind of like, wait, they're two different, that's a whole nother topic, Trinity. Wow. But if that's a standard of what we're supposed to reach, then unity, partnership, whatever word you want to label it, that needs to be forefront. And then even looking at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, whenever he's like, if it's possible that this cup may pass from me. I've never thought about this way. Current revelation. Let me know this is theologically wrong. But whenever he says, Father, let this cup pass from me, but basically let your will be done regardless. Like, that could have been a point of conflict. That could have been that I don't want to do this, I'm not going to do this. And I feel like that's so much of our conflict is I don't want to do this, or I don't like this conversation, or I don't like how you're leading, or I don't like that you're having me do this. But Jesus humbled himself and was like, no, I truly do want them to be one, as we are one, and because we're one, I'm going to do your will regardless. And I feel like if we took that and realized that so much of this has to come down to humility on our side, it's not, sometimes the other person might be doing something that's actually wrong, but we do, like you said, have to check our motivations and realize, what do we actually want out of this conversation? What are we trying to get? And realize we need to humble ourselves and think about the other person higher than ourselves.
That's so good. Something that I thought about when you were talking about, being one with the Father, and I don't know if we talked about this in a previous video, but we've talked about this in our classes, is how we have to have that vertical unity with the Father, and it always has to come down to that vertical unity, and then that kind of trickles down into having that horizontal unity with the body and with each other, with our teammates and whoever it is that we're working with. But that vertical unity is so key in order to have like that flow of how we even have unity with the people that we're working with.
No, it's true. It's really good. I mean, we do need to have that unity with the Father before we can have any unity with anyone else.
Yeah.
Because if we have an issue with Jesus, kind of like what you mentioned and I mentioned earlier, it's like we will not, absolutely not, ever have unity with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we kind of talked about this issue with ourselves a lot, and that's very true. But there is another person involved with conflict usually. And I think we're going to loop back probably to ourselves because most of the time it's ourselves. But let's just briefly talk about others and what to do. Like, what if someone is actually doing something that's wrong or they are doing something that, like, is worth a conversation?
Yeah.
What do we do then?
I think, well, we've already kind of touched on what do we do ourselves is, like, we take it to the Lord, like, ask, like you said, ask yourself, is this, like, a battle worth fighting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it, like, just a preference, or is it something that is, like, maybe biblically wrong or ethically wrong or causing conflict with a large group of people? So I think, like, first approaching them in humility, like saying, hey, like, we need to have a conversation about this because, and then I think, like, identifying what it's doing, whether this is separating us as, like, coworkers or it's separating, like, me from whoever, like, it's causing a problem in the workplace.
Yeah.
I think that would, like, be a good place to start, like, saying, like, hey, we need to have this conversation and here's why I think we need to.
No, it's really good.
Yeah.
Kind of want to loop this back, not loop it back, I haven't talked about this yet. I kind of want to talk about briefly an example that we have in marriage. Both Mary Jane and I are married, not to each other. Mary Jane's husband's actually right over there. You can't see him editing the video. My wife's at home currently. But there's this piece of advice that I got whenever I was a newlywed, which I still am, but earlier in my newlywed stage. Exactly. And it was assume that they love you. And that alone, because we could also talk about, like, assume that it's the culture differences, if there's a culture differences, but assume that the other person loves you.
Yeah.
And I feel like, especially whenever you're dealing with people on your own team or people in your own same ministry or people in your family or people at your job, assuming that they love you and they're not trying to be a jerk really takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah.
Because let's say my wife does something, I know, like, deep down, I know that she loves me, but I have a choice in that moment that she does something against me or I do something against her. We both have a choice. Am I going to trust and believe in who they are and who I know they are in terms of, I know that they love me. I know that she loves me. Or am I going to take that moment and run into the flesh and be like, she hates me. She always does this.
Yeah.
Like, she's so mean. She never thinks about me, whenever I know all of that's wrong and it's not true.
Totally.
But am I alone in this, that whenever someone does something against you, you immediately run to, like, they're jerks, they don't like me, they've never liked me. It's kind of weird how that's immediately what we run to, right?
Yeah. It's so easy to run to that because then it puts kind of the problem on them, sort of, and then it's all dealt with, but really that's just creating more conflict.
Yeah.
And it's not really dealing with the bigger problem there. Yeah.
I think something else Christians and people tend to do is that they, like, want to go tell everyone else, like, oh, wait till you hear what this person did to me, and, like, this is what they did, this is why it's bothering me and all this stuff. But, like, it's so important to just, like, first go to the Lord. That's a big theme throughout all of this, but then, like, have those conversations one-on-one, because when you involve, like, 5 more people that you just told in the hallway, then it's, like, becomes an even bigger conflict, and then those 5 people have something against that one person, like, that might not even be true.
It's like the telephone game. It's like
where,
all miscommunication.
It gets mixed up. And I just think it's so important to do that, like, one-on-one, and then when you're in those conversations, if it is with another believer, to just, like, pray with them, where it's like, okay, we realize we can't do this on ourselves, like, by ourselves, we need to involve the Lord in this. We need the Holy Spirit to be with us.
And when you do that, whenever you do take it to the Holy Spirit and you assume that they love you and you do these steps that we talked about before, it completely changes what you go into the conversation thinking and saying. Because whenever you go into it kind of caught up in yourself and so prideful, like, oh, that you did this to me, you immediately will start accusing them. But if you take it to the Lord, most often than not, you'll probably end up going to them like, hey, this happened. I know you didn't mean to do this, and I know you didn't try to hurt me, but this is what I felt whenever that thing happened.
Yeah.
And it completely changes the tone of the conversation.
Yeah.
I think even before, like, jumping to that, saying, like, this is how you made me feel, if you just kind of say, like, this is a situation, like, I want to hear your side.
Yeah.
Because I know it's more than just my perspective. It's more than your perspective. But we need to, like, hear both to get to that conclusion. So just, like, listening to that person. And I think one of the biggest problems in conflict is that the other person doesn't feel heard.
Right.
And especially in ministry, like, the last thing you want is that, like, for someone to think that their perspective, their beliefs, their whatever are not valued. So, like, that is so important that we show that person that we value them, that we show them that they are significant to us by listening to them first and then sharing our side.
Yeah, that's so good. That's actually what I was going to say is, you know, after you pray, after you confront the person, then you need to be like, okay, like, what is your side of the story? Like, how are you feeling about this? And really hearing them out is super important because then they feel heard, they feel cared about. And then, you know, you usually tell your story and usually there's some sort of, like, gap or something that doesn't really make sense. Or some, like, heart issue that, like, both of you maybe have or, like, one person maybe has. And then it's like, okay, we're good now? Yeah, like...
It's kind of wild because everything that we're talking about, it's all personal. Everything that we talk about is personal. And especially, even if you broaden out to a team, like if there's team conflict in mission, then you have to realize that you have a personal responsibility and you can't just be sitting there blaming everyone else for what they're doing. Because whenever that happens to me and I kind of get prideful, the Lord reminds me of Philippians 2, whenever he talks about how Christ humbled himself to come down as a servant and humbled himself to die on a cross. And he always reminds me of that because whenever I feel misunderstood and I don't feel heard and I don't feel da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, he reminds me, hey, you remember whenever I was, you know, God and came down as man and then walked the earth and then was killed by the people that I came to save and yet I still chose to forgive them on the cross? You have no right to be prideful in this situation because there's nothing that they could have done that hasn't already happened to me and not more so, and I still chose to love them.
That's so good.
Wow.
And there's this personal responsibility that we have. And I like to say it like this, that the only thing we can do is love other people. We can't determine how they react to that love. We can't determine how they react to if we confront them with something. All we can do at the end of the day is be like, I loved that person as best as I could today. And if I didn't do that, then I have no right to be able to then say, oh, they didn't do this to me, so because I then have a personal responsibility of realizing I didn't love them well.
Dang. That's good, Austin. That's a good word.
There it is.
I mean, love is a command, right?
Yeah.
So really, if you're not loving those people, then you're kind of walking in disobedience.
I even just thought of your sweatshirt. It says love them anyway.
Love them anyway.
Like, no matter what people, like, do to you, say if you approach a conversation, like, or a conflict, and the person is like, no, I don't want to talk about it, or no, I don't forgive you, like, if they're still holding offense in their heart, then you still have to, like, have to and get to love them anyway.
No, it's an honor. It's a joy. I mean, it's why I think it's so great that whenever Paul was in prison, he said, basically that what happened to him served to advance the gospel. And basically now how all the prison guard. And he's like, I mean, I'm imagining Paul chained to a prison guard for 8 hours a day. And just being like, man, that guy was just probably like loving the heck out of him. And there's this example from in YWAM, this guy named Dan Bauman. I'm not sure if I can share other people's examples, but I'm going to. There's this guy named Dan Bauman who was imprisoned in Iran. Yeah. I remember him telling us a story because this blew my mind, and I hope I get it right. If I'm getting it wrong, I'm sorry, Dan Bauman. Please don't hate me. But I remember that whenever he was in prison and there'd be a guard that would come up to beat him, he'd always get up and shake him and like shake his hand.
He shakes him.
Very different meaning of the story if I say it that way. Shakes his hand. But shake his hand every single time and greet him. And I'm like, what kind of love do you have to be able to stand up and shake the hand of the person who just beat you or is going to? Like knowing that that's about to come. And that's kind of the example that Jesus gave, is that whenever people beat him, he still loved them. Yeah. And I think a big takeaway from this whole conversation is that we still have to love people. That's the only thing at the end of the day we have control of. Yeah, that's all I had.
Yep.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
really good.
Is there anything else that we really want to talk about this? I feel like we could talk about it for a lot longer, but try not to complicate it too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that my husband and I always try to do is, like, after we've have talked about the conflict and, like, heard both of our sides, is to really speak out forgiveness. Because it's like, I feel like if you don't speak out forgiveness, if one person doesn't say, will you forgive me, and the other person says, I forgive you, then, like, I feel like it just leaves, like, a foothold for the enemy, where it's like, oh, like after the conversation, things keep coming up with that, and like, if you haven't, like, spoken out forgiveness, there's so much power in just, like, declaring it and saying, like, I forgive you.
Yeah, that's so good. I think the last step after that is just really discuss kind of how you can avoid that conflict in the future.
True.
Because like I said, we always have conflict, but there are ways to kind of go around that and to communicate that better. So, you know, like, you guys talk about and discuss how you can do that, like, better in the future, or how to avoid that in the future. Whether that's, like, going to the person right away and saying, like, hey, like, what you said today, that kind of hurt my feelings. Like, oh, and, you know, the person's like, oh, I didn't even mean it that way.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah,
it's just so easy to, like, actually avoid that if you just discuss that and talk about it.
And, I mean, we started talking about how conflict can ruin your ministry. It totally can, 100%. But it also has the potential to heighten your ministry if you handle it correctly.
Right.
Because even if you take, let's say, for example, someone who doesn't feel heard in their ministry, if someone isn't feeling heard, but they realize I have a personal responsibility, still love the people who I'm not feeling heard from, then they can take it to the Lord, feel their validation from the Lord, and then whenever they do, and you should approach the other people stating your concerns, don't just sit there and never feel heard. That's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
But even that conversation completely changes because now you're approaching it from a level of love and respect.
Yeah.
And I think what you said is just, like, key, because I think that's the key to making it going from something that can completely destroy your ministry to something that can completely heighten your ministry. Is that if you do walk out in forgiveness, this is something that has the potential to completely rewrite how your ministry is going, because then you'll show everyone else the example that Christ wants us to show.
Yeah,
that we are one with the Father, that we love each other as Christ loved the church, that we do all the things that he said in the Bible, and we're walking that out, and then people from the outside will look in and be like, there's something different about that group of people because of the way they love each other.
Yeah, that's so good. One last thing that I would add is conflict actually gives room for vulnerability, and it gives room for you to express your feelings, how you're feeling, and it makes you feel heard and, like, understood, and it gives you kind of, like, this space to just express that, and people, like, want you to be real and vulnerable, and you should never just hide, like, what you're feeling, because people are going to come around you and love you and champion you in who you are called to be. I
think the enemy wants to isolate us.
Right.
He wants to get us away because he knows that we're meant to be in a body. And so the thing he's going to try to do when you're especially when you're working in teams, is he's going to try to make you feel alone and make you feel like no one else cares.
Yeah.
But it is that vulnerability piece of I'm willing to put my heart on the line because I love you so much and I know who I am in the Lord and all this different stuff, and that will completely change everything for you.
It's good.
That's good.
It's good.
Is there anything else that you guys want to share? No?
That's it.
I think that's it.
I think that's it.
I think that's good. Well, thank you guys again so much for joining us at YWAM Kansas City. We will do another podcast next week, probably, maybe, most likely, maybe 2 weeks, who knows. But you can like, comment, subscribe if you want to. Classic saying. We love these conversations. See you guys later. Bye.
Bye.